this month, but we have an auction in 6 days from now, so things are a little bit hectic around the office. So I've got a PowerPoint with some covers from next week's sale that I was going to share. But in the meantime, while I get situated on this train, I just wanted to turn it over to Alyssa for a couple of minutes, who has been handling the marketing and a lot of the promotion behind the sale, and just let her say a few words about what goes into the production of an auction catalog and try and get people to see something they might like to bid on. So I'll turn it over to you, Alyssa.
Cool. Hi, everybody. My name's Alyssa Baumgardner. I'm the marketing manager over at HR Harmer. This has been a really exciting, fun sale for us. We've gotten to handle some really cool material. If you don't know, this sale is featuring 3 postal history collections from 3 different cities. So Hartford, Chicago, and Philadelphia. And all of those are really interesting historic places. So we've gotten to put together a lot of really cool content for those. We actually just last week went to Philadelphia and we filmed some videos for Instagram, which we're releasing over this next week. And then we went to Hartford on Monday. And we are releasing those videos that we put together for that as well. And so basically what we do when we put together social media campaigns is we try to sites and things that tie into the collection, and usually Charles will be on camera and will film something and put together a little bit of like a history lesson that then ties into the collection. So I like to make sure that marketing is not only salesmanship but also educational, and it gives people something as well as promoting our product. Also, a big push that we've been doing this year is we've been doing a lot more press. So when we get a collection from a specific city, I tried to put together a press release, try to get people interested in the collection. And that's really difficult sometimes for getting people interested in philately and getting people interested in a story about philately. I kind of was told when I first started that it was going to be a really difficult thing to get any press interest, but it actually has turned out to be very positive so far. So we got the cover of the Chicago Sun-Times to cover the sale of the Lynn Piskowitz collection that is happening next week. And then the Chicago Tribune picked it up as well, which was really exciting. And then we had the Hartford, oh God, the Hartford Current. Yeah, that's what it's called. Pick up the sale of Tony Dewey's collection. I don't know if any of you have ever met Tony Dewey, but he's a Hartford native out in Connecticut, and he has a wonderful collection that we're really happy to sell. So we got a great article in that as well, and we've gotten a ton of positive response off of that. The catalog production, do you want me to talk about that, Charles, at all, or I don't know. Okay, catalog production is probably the most complicated part of our job. It is where all of the team members, also people outside of our team, have to work together to put together a rather complicated piece of marketing. And so Charles and Allison are both philatelists. They both describe the catalog, which is wonderful. I don't know how to do any of that, so much respect to them. And then we have a wonderful catalog production team who are in St. Joseph, Missouri. and they're lovely, but they're not in our office. So we have to find ways to communicate the look and the aesthetic that we want for the catalog. We have a wonderful assistant who does all of our scanning for us, and then I pretty much work with that catalog production team to communicate what we want the catalog to look like, and then I edit the entire catalog as well. So all of that, I mean, not the describing, but all of taking their descriptions and communicating with everyone takes about 2 weeks of just really intense work. But I think that this catalog is definitely my favorite that we've put together. It's really beautiful and we're really proud of it. And if you want a copy, just let us know. But it's definitely worth the work, but it is probably the most complicated process of our jobs. So yeah, that's pretty much what I've been doing for the sale. We're really, really excited about it. I think it's going to be one of our best sales yet. So if you have any questions about marketing or how we put things together, I would be happy to answer any of those.
Good question.
Mhm.
Could you refresh the name of your company?
Yeah, HR Harmer.
I get the catalog.
And you can, if you're on Instagram and YouTube, I invite you to follow us. I'll drop the handles in the chat so you can keep up with us.
Get the catalog.
I have a question. Does the seller have much say in determining what kind of value to put on the box, starting the price in the auction at all?
Sorry, I can't quite hear the question.
So he asked if the seller had much input into the value placed on the items in the auction.
Yeah, Allison, do you want to take that?
So we lot and price the items in-house. All of our consigners will get a document with a manuscript of all the lot descriptions and prices once everything's been described, and they have we offer them to give input on everything. Generally, there's not a lot of debate with the prices. Usually people will give us what they paid for items, or we look at comparable items on the market to try and figure out where we want to start prices on things, but it's a collaborative process for sure.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
I find it fascinating the logistics leading up to a major auction, and I think it's a very interesting topic. Give me a sense, if you will, this particular auction. What was the timeline, time duration from the time you first made contact with the owners and got a signed agreement to sell their material to the time of the auction? What's sort of the elapsed time for something like that?
Yeah, that depends on the consignment. We do about 4 auction cycles a year. So depending on where things end up in our office, it's usually a couple of months. So I think the first one in our office for this sale was Lens, and that we got in the fall, around when we were having our fall sale, and we planned it for March to try and fill it up with like consignments, and then the other ones came in at that, and they just kind of get staggered as it goes along. So we have these set points for when sales are, and then as people come to us to consign, we fit them into whichever sale is going to fit their material best and try and match it with complementing material. Charles, did you?
Yeah, I would say the average lead time is about 3 to 6 months. Like Biscuits, for example, we first started talking with him at APS show in Sacramento last year. So from August through about October, that was the negotiation process. I got on a plane, flew back to Northern California to meet with Len. We signed a contract, and that gave us about 4 or 5 months to get everything written up and marketed. Tony Dewey, on the other hand, came to us in late January of this year, I believe. So it was a little bit of a tighter turnaround, about 2 months from soup to nuts. So the average is 3 to 6 months.
Just like to point out that you should actually do a quick YouTube on this process, because I think that might
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I would be
Some of
interested in
the
doing that.
Sam from the last conversation about auction premiums? Because there's a lot of work that goes into it that I don't think people think about.
Yeah, for sure. Even like, I mean, logistical things that people just don't even think about, like putting lots on lot cards and making sure everything's labeled and doing inventory, and setting up phone bidding and setting up just different taking in mail bids. When we get bids mailed into us, we have to enter that into the system. I mean, making sure that everything has been thought through, everything is prepared. And then after the sale, we have to think about like being completely prepared to ship out things as payments come in. And then Allison and I process all of those payments. And so it's a lot of organization and a lot of moving parts that have to synchronize in order for it not to be complete chaos, essentially.
Yeah.
Are there some for this upcoming one here for the 3 cities? Are there some, when I get home, I'll have to go on the website and dig into this auction. I think it's going to be interesting, but are there some particular marquee items that are getting a lot of attention, high value individual items that are sort of drawing people's interest?
Yes, Charles has a PowerPoint. Hopefully he'll get to share. But there's definitely some really exciting items. Allison, do you want to talk about a couple of them?
Yeah, off the top of my head, from the Chicago collection, there's a Chicago manuscript cancel. It's quite nice. There's only a handful of those, and that was back from we think of Chicago as such a big city today, so it's really interesting to see the manuscript postmark from when it was just a town of a handful of people. One that's a personal favorite of mine, there's a letter that was sent from Samuel Clemens, or Mark Twain, to one of his publishers, and we made a video on that. We went and visited Hartford and made some videos. That one's one of my personal favorites. I'd have to look back at
there's a really wonderful return to sender Chicago World's Fair cover that is a favorite of mine personally. There's the full rigged, perfect. There's the full rigged ship from Philadelphia, which is a gorgeous cancel. We made a Instagram video about that as well. And there's only a few of those known, and this is definitely one of the greatest strikes of it. Those are the ones that come to mind right now, and Charles is back, so he can probably talk in a little more detail about them.
The question was, we were wondering what items were featured or gaining some interest, or more showpieces.
Sounds like a great segue into the PowerPoint, isn't it?
It sure does.
One second.
Hi, I am Ajay from Bangalore, India. Good morning to you from India.
Hi.
I have a quick question. On your
Yeah.
suggested YouTube video, if you could explain at the beginning the process that I train in my collection. It's all in albums, all in stock. And how long does it take to sort that out compared to handing you boxes of very loose stuff?
Oh, it's like night and day. Having a well-organized collection really makes a difference in terms of turnaround. We do get people coming with lots of boxes, and I'm sure it's similar for any dealer or auctioneer, is that the owner knows their collection better than anybody, so those detailed notes can really make a difference in terms of catalog production, and I think in return on value as well, so that nobody misses anything.
It also can make a difference on commission rates if you're working with an auction house, for sure. I know we definitely have to because it takes us longer. It takes us more effort to go through a disorganized collection. the commission is going to be that we take is going to be higher on a collection like that than if we get a really nicely organized collection, because that's less hours and less work for us. So that just seems fair at the end of the day. So that's advice of you.
The beginning of your video. I'll get out of the way so you can do the slides.
Yeah.
Perfect. Can everyone see the PowerPoint?
Yep.
Excellent. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, just sort of a nice general overview of what we have in our upcoming sale. We're basically calling it the Trail of Three Cities because these are three different collections focusing on three different cities. The story does come through their postal history. So Glenn Piskowitz collected Chicago, Ben Coppersmith collected Philadelphia, and Tony Dewey collected Hartford, Connecticut. So beginning with Glenn Piskowitz, a couple of the highlights. This is a manuscript cancellation from Chicago from 1833. So Chicago's post office was founded in 1831. At this point, they still didn't have a hand stamped postmark. They were still literally signing a manuscript postmark. Everything it wasn't until later in 1833 that they actually, modern got a hand stamp for the post office. So a great early relic from Chicago. You never think of cities like this, at such an early stage. Next up is a free frank from Stephen A. Douglas, best remembered for his debates.
You're breaking up really bad.
Charles, you're breaking up.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask one of you guys to take over.
Okay. I have this PowerPoint as well.
I think he can hear and maybe
Okay, and he can do the PowerPoint. Allison, do you want to take the reins, or I can, or
sure.
we can trade off or whatever.
Yeah. Charles on the train.
Can you hear me any better now?
Not really.
No. Oh, so sorry about this. We didn't mean to.
Oh, no, life happens. It's fine. It's technology.
Unfortunately, Charles did describe this collection, so I'm not as familiar with it. And he really is the best person to talk about it.
Charles, do you want to go to the next one? I think we could maybe talk about the next one a little more. Charles. Oh yeah. Okay. So this is a really gorgeous patriotic cover. And it's a Union patriotic. The special thing about this is that it has the delayed mail not on time hand stamp on it, which is really interesting to see on a patriotic.
This cover is also set to Camp Douglas, which is a famous prisoner of war camp in Chicago during the Civil War. So it's interesting to see this kind of Union Civil War postal history. And quite a nice patriotic. So we can.
Yep.
Next slide.
This is the World's Fair Return to Writer that I was talking about earlier. It has that gorgeous hand stamp on it with the pointing hands. And yeah, it's from the Chicago World's Fair in 1893. So very interesting historic cover and definitely garnering a lot of attention.
Great, we'll move on to Van. Van Coppersmith's collection of Philadelphia postal history is this collection of a lot of early transatlantic ship mail and oh, Charles, you can move slides whenever.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm watching the meeting on my computer, but talking into my telephone.
Love that.
We can move on to Van's collection.
Can I go back to this really quick? Because I think this is a fascinating cover that deserves to be mentioned. This is an imperforate stamp, so the 1851 3-cent imperforate issue. A gentleman in Chicago basically jerry-rigged a sewing machine in order to privately perforate stamps on behalf of the post office. So this is an imperforate stamp that had private perforations applied by an individual in Chicago a full year before the U.S. federal government began perforating postage stamps. So if you look at it, you might not think it was anything special. It looks like, any of the millions of other 3-cent perforated postage stamps from 1857. But the fact that it was used in January means that it actually predates the federally issued perforated stamp. So that's your first little sign that something is going on here. And then if you measure the perforations, you can find out this is actually, again, one of the private Chicago perforations created before the federal government picked up the practice. So I just wanted to highlight that before we moved on too far. This is a freight money cover. Allison and Alyssa, do you guys want to try to explain freight money?
Absolutely not.
So I'm going to be honest, freight are arcane, obtuse aspects of United States postal history, but it is something I have kind of fallen in love with over the last couple of weeks. I think sometimes you sort of have to confront your fears and learn the things that are most difficult. So basically what freight money means, before there were contract mail sailings between the United States and England, before the US government and the UK government set up, formalized structures with the shipping companies, it was up to you to find a private ship essentially to carry your mail from the United States to the UK or vice versa. And the way they facilitated, because if you were in Philadelphia, for example, or Hartford, and the ship was leaving from New York or Boston, there was no way for you to pay the ship captain directly to carry the letter for you. So the U.S. government set up a system whereby they would essentially collect money for you to be transmitted to the ship captain. And essentially it was 12.5 cents if it was carried by a sailing ship, 25 cents if it was carried by a steamship. So double the rate for a much quicker and much safer trip via steamship. But the government was essentially acting as a collection agency for these private shipping companies. So this, and a lot of these things, you can only tell that they are freight money if you really dissect the rate. So this one, for example, 25 cents could be simply a double rate letter from Philadelphia to New York. But if you look at it, it says single at top left, so you know this is only a single weight letter. That 25-cent rate then has to be explained by 12.5 cents domestic postage, 12.5 cents freight money for a sailing ship to England. So I understand this is very confusing in a way, and again, a bit arcane. I did my best to explain it in the introductory matter to our catalog. So if you want to learn more about freight money, again, I tried to make it as succinct and interesting as possible in our catalog. Another cover from Philadelphia from Van's collection, this one with a wonderful cameo advertising corner card for LaPierre House, Ward and Brothers. Philadelphia, they were basically winemakers, and they were communicating with fellow winemakers. Really an attractive illustrated cameo corner card from the winemaking industry. Another one of these very arcane concepts is basically the disparity between paper money and gold and silver coins during and after the Civil War. So what was happening is the government in 1862 started issuing paper money called greenbacks, because the backs of them were printed in green ink. And as the war went on, and especially after the war, the difference in currency fluctuated day to day. So the paper currency and the gold standard were not on par until the late 1870s. The U.S. government, when they transmitted mail from overseas, had to remit currency to foreign countries in gold. So if they collected money in paper currency, the postage due was collected in paper currency, and they remitted that to foreign countries in gold, the post office was actually taking a major hit on every unpaid letter that was received in the United States. So what they ended up doing is they would collect the postage due in U.S. notes at whatever that day's prevailing conversion rate was. So they had different hand stamps made up. You could see in U.S. notes. 13 here, basically the 5-cent postage that was due was the equivalent of 13 paper notes on that given day. So again, something I wrote about in the introduction to our catalog. I'd hopefully make it make a little bit more sense. Here's a beautiful incoming cover, much more straightforward, where the postage was paid in England, and then upon arrival in the U.S., it was basically prepaid all the way from England. This is something that arose out of the late 1840s. Prior to that, there was a sort of postal war between the United States and the United Kingdom where they weren't recognizing each other's currency. Luckily, that all got sorted out quickly. And again, in this instance, you could prepay for a letter all the way from the UK to the US. And then lastly, I think you guys were talking about this one. Alyssa, I think you mentioned it, the full-rigged ship postmark of Philadelphia that was used on incoming mail between 1834 and 1835. One of the most beautiful early illustrated postmarks, only in use again for a very short period of time. And the more it was used, the more it. I apologize for the announcement over the speaker. The more this postmark was used, the more it became worn down. So the fact that this strike has so much detail to it means that it was used relatively early in the life of the postmark. And again, this was applied to mail entering the United States at Philadelphia. And then lastly, the Tony Dewey collection of Hartford postal history will begin at the beginning on His Majesty's service, a letter from 1717, the earliest letter in Tony Dewey's collection. The gentleman who sent this would go on to become governor of Connecticut in the 1760s. And again, this is one of the earliest letters from the state of Connecticut period. Not much mail was being sent in the 17 teens. Hartford Mail Route was a short-lived independent post that transmitted mail from the city of Hartford. It connected up with other independent posts like Hales. So this cover was carried out of Hartford by the Hartford Mail Route, connected with Hales that paid the hand stamp, was applied in New York City, and then ultimately it was transmitted to Philadelphia. These independent mail companies transmitted mail between cities for a short period in 1844 and 1845. Obviously, the government didn't like this sort of competition because these services were typically transmitting mail cheaper and faster than the federal government was. So by 1845, they cracked down and basically no longer permitted this sort of company to exist. So there's only about a dozen or two covers with the Hartford Mail Route stamp on it. This is the one of two examples with a pair of the stamp and one of the great covers of the independent mails. This is a U.S. 1847 10-cent issue bisect, so paying the 5-cent rate from Hartford to Brooklyn, Connecticut. It's the only 10-cent bisect from the 1847 issue known to have been used from Hartford, and it's also the only 1847 10-cent bisect on a morning cover. So you see the black border. This obviously contains condolences or news of the passing of a local resident. So great combination of rarity. The only bisect from Hartford, only bisect on a morning cover. And then real quick, just the last couple of covers. Here's a strip of the 1855 10-cent green type 1. This is positions 98 through 100, so the bottom right of the sheet margin, used paying the 30-cent rate to Hamburg, Germany. This was care of the American consul in Germany. Very rare stamp in such beautiful quality. And again, just a wonderful piece of transatlantic Hartford postal history. And last up, my favorite item in the entire sale. This is a cover from Hartford with a corner card for S.L. Clemens, better known to most of us as Samuel L. Clemens or Mark Twain. This was sent in December of 1883 to James R. Osgood, who was his publisher in Boston, Massachusetts. Osgood published The Prince and the Pauper and The Soul and White Elephant in 1882. That was the start of their business relationship with Mark Twain. Osgood himself, the proprietor of the publishing house, took a riverboat trip with Mark Twain, and that ended up with the publication of Life on the Mississippi, which was kind of a financial failure upon publishing. Fortunately, all of Mark Twain's letters to his publishers have been collected and published a number of years ago, so I was able to track down the original letter that was contained in this envelope and it is one of the most visceral, brutal, essentially breakup letters that anyone has ever sent to a publisher. It was a scathing letter that Mark Twain was personally out $50,000 upon the publishing of Life on the Mississippi. It was the end of his business relationship with Osgood. And again, whenever I read this letter, on the one hand, I feel sorry that Osgood had to receive such a brutal breakup letter. On the other hand, I would be kind of honored for Mark Twain to direct his ire, his very witty ire, I will admit, at me. So, kind of a blessing and a curse if you were in Osgood's shoes, I think. So, again, those are just a couple of items we wanted to highlight. I want to apologize for my, inability to, sit in front of a computer normally and present like I'd intended. But, it's the life of a philatelic auctioneer, I guess, is learning to roll with the punches and make do with the best of these situations. I know Michael can relate all too well to such situations. So if anyone has any questions, I can either answer them or I would love to turn them over to Allison and Alyssa. So thank you everyone for listening along, and happy to again answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, one comment. Thank you for the presentation, because the question was asked, well, you're out of the scope. What are the highlights of the auction? You just presented them. Good way to answer a question, even when you didn't know it.
Anyone have questions?
Yeah, very interesting.
Very interesting, very interesting.
Yeah, I might have to take a look at that letter from Twain.
A question about that very early stampless cover. What was the date on that again? 17 something?
The stampless cover?
That was in Chicago?
The early one in Hartford,
Yeah.
that was 17.
That was 1717 is
Yeah.
the earliest cover in the Hartford collection.
Well, that's amazing. That's really amazing.
And essentially all mail at that point was carried by private courier or military courier. There wasn't too much of a formalized postal service at that point. You kind of had to find somebody headed the same direction as your letter and ask them to do a favor for you. So, very, very primitive at that point. Post roads hadn't been established. It's a really interesting snapshot of our nation's early postal history.
Is there much in the way of collectible material with those independent mail companies from 1844, 45? That sounded really interesting, but I got to imagine it's pretty thin on the.
Yeah, so the independent mails of 44, 45 are one of the most interesting little pockets of postal history, I think, because there's, certain companies are very rare. There's certain companies from which only a handful of covers exist, but for other companies, like Hales, for example, the one that I said connected with Hartford, there are hundreds upon hundreds of covers out there, many of which are quite affordable. So there was a huge collection at Robert A. Siegel a couple of years ago, collection by the name of Mr. Gutman, who had an entire, I think, 8 or 10 frame exhibit, and he wrote a book about Hale and Company. So there is material out there. I always wonder what sort of cultural relevance these companies had. Would your average person have known about these companies, or would they have just sort of settled for, sending mail 3 or 4 times as expensive through the U.S. Post? So it's a little, again, pocket of postal history. I'm going to log.
I think Charles is saying that he's about to lose signal. There's a
I think he's
dense
going underground. If he's on the Acela, I know where he is.
just into the woods. So
No, thank you very much. That